scared to even say, what is she talking about? Events right now? Honestly, it's happening. It's happening right now. We're having an event. It's sort of like that Jurassic Park movie where the scientist says, life will find a way. Well, we are finding a way to connect. We're doing it in new ways, and we're using a lot of different mediums to do that. And this is one of them, technology. So I'm really thankful to be able to connect with each of you. As you've been watching the news, I'm sure, and social media, I'm sure you've made your own observations about what is this new landscape looking like? Like, how are we going to connect? So I just have a couple of pictures that I wanted to show you, and you may have seen these already, but what does our landscape look like today? So here's the first one. This is an exercise class in Rome, Italy on March 18th, 2020. Can you guys see that? And you guys may have, yeah. So a new way to do exercise class. I've been doing some exercising, taking my teenagers jogging, and my husband as well. So that's been really good. But also doing yoga class with the internet. Never did that before. Here's another really interesting one. This, can you guys see, is the Dubai Orchestra playing a concert on March 13th, 2020. As you see, the stadium is empty and they're playing their instruments, and it's posting live. So we're enjoying entertainment. You see different people singing, and they're putting all these videos together, choirs, and finding new ways to express themselves with art. Here's another really interesting one that I found. This here is a ballet dancer in New York on March 18th, 2020. So that is a profound picture in my mind, where this is Times Square, New York. Like, wow, that's a new landscape. And here's one that really caught my attention. This is shoppers are practicing social distancing at a mall in Indonesia on March 18th, 2020. So from these pictures, you can see that things have changed. Things have changed for a very good reason. As we're trying to flatten the curve, as we're trying to navigate, what does it look like to be together and apart at the same time? And so what I want to talk to you today about is, how does this new social norm, this new landscape, how does this affect events? What does this look like? Will there be events again? And if so, what will that look like? How and why? And where do we go from here? So I just want to first of all kind of touch on the first point, which is, will there be events again? Yes. My prediction is absolutely yes. And I think that the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. And so if you folks remember, we had the Second World War, and there was the Spanish flu, and then after that, it was the Roaring 20s. And there were a lot of different factors that played into that, but that was one indicator. Recently, in China, when they had taken the restrictions off, there was a flood of people going to the mountains. And they went, oops, maybe we should have looked at that a little different. So our government has already talked about what will that new landscape look like, and there will be definitely provisions put in place so that we don't have a big rush of things happening. But I'm already hearing conversations through different social groups and online about their post-COVID party and what that's going to look like, and how will they be connecting and making that happen. So absolutely, we are social creatures. We seek that connection. And this is one of the ways that we are connecting now, but what will that look like as these restrictions lift? And what should we be mindful of to ensure that we're being sensitive and responsible to the people around us? So there's a couple of different points where I think that are going to be the real points where we're going to see change happen, where there's going to be absolutely no room for being anything other than diligent. And the first spot that I'm going to talk about is health and safety. And that's going to show up in a lot of different ways, where you're going to see, for example, venues, ensuring that these are sanitized. Like, this is going to be a question that people are going to start asking. So how do you sanitize? When's the last time that you sanitized? How safe is it for me to be in this environment and for my guests to be in this environment? You're going to see those questions start to come forward. We're also going to start to see for venues, when people are saying, well, this venue can handle 180 people, for example, or 500 people in this space. So what does that mean? Does that mean 500 people shoulder to shoulder? Is that that's your fire regulation? But is there a new regulation now where, yeah, I was comfortable here to here, like maybe this much space in between. Maybe we're going to have a little bit more space that we're going to want. So maybe those numbers might shift a little bit. Even if it's not a regulatory thing, it might just be a comfort thing, that people are just going to want that extra room so that they can slowly dip their toes into this new event landscape. When it comes to food, this is going to be a real biggie. And it always has been. I just want to clarify that. This is not new information in the sense of these weren't standards that were important before, like sanitation and food safety. These are always have been important. However, I think that they're going to get a little more attention maybe than they have in the past. So, for example, food safety, ensuring that you are using a caterer who is practicing good food safety. And there's a lot of different sites out there where you're going to hire a caterer, but are you doing your due diligence to know where are they preparing that food? Are they actually a licensed caterer? Do they have insurance? Are they following Alberta Health Services guidelines? Like, these are all really important questions to be asking. And there's going to be a greater responsibility for the organizers and the vendors to ensure that these things are happening. And it's not just from a regulatory perspective, but I think it's also from just people. People are going to want that. I know I do. I know I've always looked for that, but that's just going to be even more so, and there's going to be even greater accountability for that. So just really being diligent about ensuring that we are knowing what those regulations and those guidelines and those best practices are, and then following that. The next piece is technology integration, and we're doing it right now. We're having a Facebook Live event. But this is a really interesting thing, and it's actually been happening for a while, but it's like now everyone's engaged in it, or comfort. Maybe there was a little bit more of a, well, I don't know if we really need to engage in that technology thing. And now people have engaged in it, and they're like, oh, well, this is actually pretty good. So let's maybe do this more. How does that look going forward? So I think there's going to be two major pieces that we're going to start to see in this area. One, organizations are going to start to say, or people are going to start to say when they're organizing their event, do we need to do this live, or do we just do this virtually? Could this be just as effective this way? So although there is a real need for that connection, it just might be a time and money thing. It depends on what that objective of that event is. So that's going to be the first thing I think that we're going to start to see a little bit more in this new event landscape. But the other piece that we're going to start to see is more blended events, where there's this option where you can have live or live streaming. And you can engage that way. Maybe we're doing ticketed events, and if you want to have the live stream option, you don't have to pay as much and you can still be engaged in that event in your own way, whereas that might not have been an option before, because venues maybe for their engagement of their live attendees will have less actual people in that room to allow for that social distance that people feel comfortable with or that are mandatory. Like, we don't know what that's going to look like. I wish I had a crystal ball. I don't know for sure, but this is my prediction based on what I'm seeing and hearing out in the land there. So that's going to be a real important piece to consider. And it's exciting to see some of the new technologies out there that are coming into the marketplace right now that are going to be really looking for new ways. Like, how are we doing things different? Like, maybe we haven't been doing it the best way. Maybe there's another way that we could be engaging with our audience. And it's also about comfort for people. Like, what are they comfortable with? Not everybody's going to want to run out there and do a live event. Some people are going to just really feel, you know what, I think I'm just going to hold on that for a while. I don't really feel comfortable with this at this time. And that's okay too. So how can we include them and be sensitive to their need? And I think that's part of being in a community where we want to connect, but also we want to also respect each other's space and preferences too. So the next part of that we're going to be looking for is contingency planning. And in my world of event planning, we had a little saying. We went, oops, there it is. We know that something's going to happen. It always said, I mean, I had plan G and so on and so forth. And there was always something that happened when you least expected in my own area. You know, like, you anticipate things and you plan for it, but there's something. And it's the nature of events. Events are risky by nature. It is just the way that it is. So having those contingency plans in place, and COVID-19 was the ultimate, whoa, oops, there it is. Nobody saw this coming. And some of the largest, most amazing events across the world have been canceled and postponed by this. So how they move forward in this, there will be contingency plans in place, but there are always going to be those elements that I just talked about in the very beginning. The health and safety is always going to be paramount of, you know, are we doing everything and are we ensuring that this is in fact a good situation for everybody to be participating in, and doing our absolute due diligence in that. But the contingency planning is going to be really, really important to ensure that, and it always has been, but to ensure that all of the points of due diligence are taken into account when you are planning your events going forward, because there is a greater accountability for it. And if there's going to be certain points, i.e. health and safety, that if there is a situation, that's where the technology can come into play. Because if you're not able to safely engage people in the live event, then you should not be doing it. And that's going to be sort of one of those litmus test pieces that, okay, have we done all of these things? So that's going to be something to really be mindful of. I wish I could anticipate what this new landscape looks like in that realm. And there are some pieces that I've mentioned here, but not, I can't foresee all of it. So I think that as things unfold, we'll get a better idea of what we are actually going to be managing. But definitely contingency planning is important. And event insurance is a piece of the managing your risk. And this here is a really, really important piece. If you're looking for where the risk is in any given situation, look to the insurance companies, because they're fantastic at mitigating risk. So when we're looking at events, you're going to start to see clauses, if they're not there already, as people start to do events where there's going to be some sort of mention about COVID related, as exclusions. Like you're not going to see this ignored in the event insurance world. You're going to start to see things, even I would predict, in business insurance too. You're going to start to see some of those clauses show up in revised plans. It's going to be an interesting thing to look at, but it's definitely something to be paying attention to. And so then how do you mitigate that risk? So if I'm wanting to do events and I've gotten my event insurance and now, okay, this is an exclusion from my policy, how do I ensure that I'm mitigating the risk as an organizer, knowing that events are risky by nature? And I think it really falls into the responsibility of who's doing the organizing, as always, and looking at your contracts, looking at your contracts with your venues, your vendors. Have you ensured that you've done your checkpoints, that you've asked the questions that you should be asking, like, okay, tell me about your sanitation. What does that look like? Do you know what those regulations are out there, what those standards are, and the recommendations from Alberta Health Services or whomever is your local regulatory body? Those are all real key pieces that are going to be important to mitigate risk, because ultimately it's just due diligence. When I'm planning an event, I always look at it from the perspective of A, risk, and B, what is it like to be a guest here? And was I cared for? Was I taken care of? Were my best interests at the forefront of the planner's mind? Were they being intentful about what this experience would mean for me? And I really think that when you boil it all down, it really comes down to one very, very simple thing, and that is be trustworthy. I mean, I can make all kinds of predictions, and if I had a crystal ball, I would look into that and I'd tell you everything I can see, but I don't. But there is a principle here that really boils it right down, and that's to be trustworthy. To really be doing our due diligence to ensure the safety and well-being of all of those people that are attending our event, to ensure that it's a safe space for them and that it's engaging for them as well. And there's nothing that is less engaging than when you're at an event and you feel like, oh, well, they didn't think about, for example, if you have a food allergy and you're like gluten, and you're given something, there's no food there for you, and it's during dinner. Well, that did not make you feel very good and wanting to really engage with that event because you're hungry. So these are the kinds of things. And this is a very important piece too. People, when they're moving into this new space of events, what this new landscape looks like, I think that a good organizer is going to say, how are people going to feel, and how can I ensure that they're safe but also make them feel safe? So they having sanitation station right at the door, so everybody cleans their hands, and everyone knows when I've gone into this event, their hands are clean. Having a sign up at the front of your venue saying this has been cleaned and sanitized, so that people are like, oh, okay, so I know that this is a safe space for me to engage in. And everybody kind of knows the rules of the land here. Okay, so we're supposed to stay this far apart. Like, those are all going to be really important things to be mindful of as we're moving into this new space. So with that, I'll take a few questions now. If there are any questions from the people or observations that you have made out there in your world, as we're looking at what this new landscape looks like. I don't think so. I think we're pretty good right now. Yeah. So with that, I would just say to everyone, wishing you all the very best as you're taking care of yourselves and your families, your friends from a distance, and wishing everybody health and well-being, and looking forward to connecting again in this new event landscape as we come together. And in the meantime, let's stay connected with using our technology with great events like Facebook Live from the Creative Hive. And yeah, and with that, I bid you adieu and thank you for joining us today.